Week we celebrated Easter. And it was a defining week. From the death and crucifixion of Christ to the resurrection, it changed everything. But if you are aware, there is always some kind of doubt in people's lives. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not so sure that it's an unhealthy thing to have skepticism and doubt. I think I've told this story before, but there was a murder trial going on, and the defense attorney knew he didn't have much of a prayer. His evidence was pretty strong against his client, and so at the last minute, he went before the jury and says, "I have a surprise for you." He says he looked at his watch, and he pointed to the door, and he says, "Within a minute, the person who's supposedly dead is going to walk through that door." And of course, the jury and the judge and everyone turned and looked at the door. And he then says, "Go out." But he says, "I want you to understand, you all looked at the door. There was reasonable doubt in your mind that a murder has been committed because you all looked." So the jury went out and was out a very short time. And I can tell you from jury trials that a short jury is not a good thing for a defendant. And within a few minutes, the jury came back in and said guilty. And the defense lawyer was just amazed. He says, "I saw every one of you look at that door." And the head juror says, "Yes, but we noticed your client did not." There is a case of doubt and skepticism. And Easter morning brought us into a completely different world. The Messiah had been crucified. The hopes were dashed that he was going to free the world from oppression. And then on Easter, the angel said he arose. And soon people began to meet this resurrected Jesus. But you know, unless you met him personally, you could easily be understood to say, "I'm not so sure about this." And there's a guy named Thomas, who has unfortunately throughout time got the moniker of Doubting Thomas. And for one time of doubt, he has been labeled for life. And I will tell you that the story of Thomas is anything but doubt from this point on. But when the disciples said, "We have seen Jesus," Thomas was skeptical. We begin in John 20, verses 24 through 29. It says, "Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with him when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see his hands, the mark of the nails, and place my fingers in that mark of the nails, and place my hand in his side, I will never believe.' 8 days later, his disciples were aside again, and Thomas was with them. All the doors being locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' Then he said to Thomas, 'Put your fingers here and see my hands. Put your hands and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe.' Thomas answered him, 'My Lord and my God.' Jesus said to him, 'Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.'" Thomas was seeing something and hearing something that was not normal. People did not resurrect from the grave. They had seen Lazarus, but that took Jesus to do it. And now Jesus was dead. So, in fact, there's good reason for Thomas to be a little skeptical, to wonder if, in fact, what these people were saying was, in fact, true. And I have heard too many times in the church that if you ask questions, if you doubt, if you have skepticism, that that's somehow a sin. And I would like to tell you that that is not necessarily the case. If you look at the Bible is full of individuals who have had skepticism and doubts. From Job, David, Elijah, All of them sought God and asked questions because they did not understand. And I will tell you, not any one of them was instantly convicted because they doubted. And I see Thomas's story here. I do not see anywhere where Jesus says, "You foolish man," and condemns Thomas for his doubt. Indeed, he confronts Thomas and says, "Prove me, show me, see that I am real." Some of my favorite authors, guys like C.S. Lewis, Josh McDowell, and Lee Strobel, were atheists who, very scientifically minded individuals, set out to prove the Bible wrong and Jesus Christ to be nothing but a fable. All three of these men literally set out with their goal to disprove God. And all three of those men became apologists for the gospel. Because as they searched the evidence, as they searched through their doubt and their skepticism, these three men were left with an unequivocal truth. Just like Thomas meeting the risen Christ, they came to a point where they said, "Okay, it's real. I know." My favorite scene, you've ever seen the movie Case for Christ. And by the way, we've been talking about having a movie time here at church where we'll show some Christian movies. I was talking to Doreen about that. Give me some feedback as to when you think the good times would be to do that. I thought Sunday afternoon perhaps, maybe a Saturday, I don't know. Give me your feedback as to what you would see that as being a good time. Case for Christ is one of those that I definitely want to do eventually. But in the scene that I'm talking about, Lee Strobel has spent 2.5 years trying to prove God wrong. His wife became a Christian, and he wanted to prove unequivocally that what she believed in was foolishness. And the scene in the movie that just always sticks with me is Lee Strobel is in the basement going through paperwork, and the evidence so overwhelming that he turns his eyes skyward and says, "Okay, I give up. You're real." And that was the moment for Lee Strobel that he became a Christian. That his doubt and his skepticism became faith. And ever since that day, the man has spoken. He's a pastor. He's written numerous books, all of which I will recommend. And he is proving by evidence the case for Christ, the case for resurrection. He has unequivocal evidence that he has researched. These men started out in a point of doubt and skepticism, and God did not condemn them. Rather, he led them through the evidence, through the investigation. And I think there is something about doing that I think we as Christians may have lost today. If you sit there and you listen to me talk about the Bible, and you go, "Well, Rick says it's so it must be so," I'm here to tell you, you're on dangerous ground. You must know for yourself what the Word of God says. You must have a faith and a knowledge of Jesus that supersedes mine. Because I am a human being, and I can and I will be flawed and wrong at times. So do not trust me alone. Search for God. You know, it was interesting when Jesus offered Thomas his nail-scarred hands. It doesn't say whether Thomas actually reached out and put his finger in the hole. I'm kind of skeptical that he did not, because his response, "My Lord and my God," was one of awe and fear and reverence. He had seen enough to convince him. And you know what? That's what it took for Thomas. And Thomas was a very key man in the early church. He is led to the church in India and Syria. He was murdered by Hindu priests by being speared to death because he refused to refute the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Thomas lived the rest of his life without doubt, without fear, because he had met the resurrected Jesus. And I'll be honest with you, if I look at myself, I find I honestly resemble Thomas more than perhaps I should. I've always been a cynic. I've always been a skeptic. And I'm here to tell you that in some cases, like being a police officer, that's not a bad thing. To not take things for face value is an important aspect of being a police officer. And I don't believe that I've ever been condemned for doubting God, but I do know that in my heart I have been convicted because the evidence that was overwhelmingly before me was being rejected because of my skepticism. Skepticism and doubt are in and of themselves not wrong. But I'm here to tell you that there's a fine line between healthy doubt and skepticism, and doubt and skepticism that defies knowledge, defies wisdom. When I know what I know, but I refuse to acknowledge it. And our friend Job is a perfect example. Job, throughout most of the early book of Job, stayed strong and solid in God. He was, through many chapters, a solid man who had his doubts and had skepticisms why God was putting him through this. But we find later in the book where Job begins to question God and say, hey, look, this isn't right. Now, I can't tell you where the definitive line was for Job. I read the book and I see it pretty clearly from God's perspective. Because God comes to Job and speaks to him directly and says, hey, were you there when I created the world? Were you there when I put the planets into place? You are asking and questioning God in a way that is not right, which is not healthy. And like I said, the fine line to read Job and to tell you that here's the point where I see Job turning that corner, I can't. And I have to be honest with myself. I don't always see it either in my own doubt and skepticism. But make no mistake, there is a line in doubt where God proves himself, where he shows himself enough evidence for you to be convicted, and yet you still remain doubtful or fearful to be anything but skepticism. Now with Job, we see in that book that Job quickly repented. As soon as he was confronted by God, he goes, you know what? I've been a fool. You're right, I wasn't there when you created the world. I don't know what I think I know. And I'm a fool to question you. Job came back from an unhealthy doubt to a point where he trusted God again. Doesn't mean he understood everything. In fact, I suspect Job was left even more confused. The line, and I will suggest to you this, the line between healthy doubt and unhealthy doubt lies in whether or not it leads you to seek truth. If you come with me to a question and say, this doesn't make sense. Why is it that God did this? Why is it that this is the way it is? That's not unhealthy. However, if after reading the Bible and understanding, and let me tell you, you're not going to know all the answers. We as human beings cannot begin to understand all the answers. But when I start to come to a point where God has proven to me, and I find myself in a limbo state, where I refuse to trust God, where I refuse to look for the truth any further, because I know that that will change my life, then I am in unhealthy doubt, and I will bring myself into a bad place. Like I said, you will not ever have all the answers. And because I don't know all the answers, and I know God has told me I can't know all the answers, it may leave me reluctant to ask any questions. I may say to myself, well, I'm just not smart enough. I should never question God. And I don't want to go there. I think good skepticism, good doubt, leads us to learn more. I've told the Bible study group that we have that every one of the 66 books of the Bible come together to support Jesus Christ. The Old Testament looks forward to Jesus. The New Testament looks back to Jesus. It is a book of 66 books that confirm Jesus Christ. And if you read that book, while it will not answer every question you have, it will answer enough of the questions you have so that you can say, I know without doubt that God is in control. Doubt should always lead you to seek. Just like Lewis, McDowell, and Strobel, they did not start out with good intentions. They started out to prove God was wrong, that there was a myth, a fairy tale. And when they went into it to get the evidence, as Josh McDowell's book says, it was evidence that demands a verdict. There was so much evidence that the Bible was real and God was real that it demanded a verdict. A verdict of saying, I believe or I refuse to believe. That, my friends, is the difference between healthy doubt and unhealthy doubt. If your doubting leads you to find and seek the truth, you are on the right road. If, however, your pre-biases suggest that I cannot and will not and I'm going to refuse to believe even when I see it as evidenced, then my friends, you are in an unhealthy doubt, and it will lead you away from God. You should never fear doubt. It is part of searching for the truth. And while God calls us to have faith and to trust in Him, He never condemns people like Thomas who have their due diligence, shall we say, to seek the truth and know for a fact their doubts were mindless. When I look at what doubt can do, I look at the book of James, and when James is talking about doubt, it can lead to some paralyzing things. James 1:5-7 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave that the sea is driven and tossed by the wind. For the person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. And I have to just stop here real quick, because you hear the word doubt, and in English language, that doubt can cover many things. And this is not suggesting that any doubt at all discourages us from Christ. The doubt that James is referring to is that unhealthy doubt that causes us to be like a piece of foam on the waves, tossed to and fro by the wind. It is never going to find a purpose or its source because it never seeks for it. The kind of doubt that James is warning against is the kind of doubt that keeps you locked into saying, I just don't know. I'm not going to look for the truth. I'm not going to try to prove or disprove. I just don't know. And I'm just going to leave it at that I don't know. My friends, Thomas doubted. And if I'm honest, so do I. So do you. And what we do with that doubt can determine a great deal on how we live our lives. Both James and Thomas were willing to die for their faith, which speaks how strongly they dealt with their doubts. They literally tasted persecution because they believed in a risen Christ. They had no more doubts. Now, that's not to say they never had another question. I will guarantee you those men went to their death with questions. And I will guarantee you that you and I will go to our graves with questions that are not answered. However, you and I have the same ability as these men did to seek the truth, to ask God to show us, to seek out through the Bible the truth of what the Bible says, and have a doubt-removing process that will take us into a place of faith. The most dangerous thing you can do with doubt is to sit in the middle of a road going, I wonder which way I should go, while cars zoom by you in either way. It's not a place to be. And yet that's what doubt will do to you. God is saying, get out of the middle of that road. Choose a direction. Seek a direction. Seek the direction through me, and I will get you where you need to be. Doubt is not a sin unless I let it paralyze me and I let it take me away from seeking the truth of God. With all the craziness in this world today, with all the lies that I hear spoken on TV, on film, in pulpits, sadly, there are lies being spread every hour of every day in this world today. And you will not recognize them as lies unless you have, in fact, sought the truth. Unless you have questioned and gone before God and said, wait a minute, show me the truth. Show me the nails in your hand. Because it's that kind of attitude, that kind of searching, that kind of desiring to get closer to God that God will honor. Today, more than ever before, we need to be solidly based in God. And our faith in Him needs to be stronger. The world around you offers no such security. And the lies that they tell you are full of things that if you look at them closely, you see how quickly they fall apart. Sadly, I hear so many people preaching false gospels. And when I look at them and I ask them simple questions, they're left speechless because their gospel, which is not the true gospel, falls apart. The gospel that you and I are called to follow, that of Jesus Christ, can stand research, can stand questions, can stand doubt. It can stand skepticism. It'll only be a sin when you cease to ask the questions and seek the truth and sit down in the middle of the road amongst the traffic and go, well, I guess I'll never know. The middle of a road is not a good place to be. Not in a physical situation, not in a spiritual situation. My friends, do not let your doubt today paralyze you from knowing Christ more. Be like Thomas. Be like C.S. Lewis, McDowell, and Strobel. These men sought God with questions. They asked the right questions and they sought truth. And they were not afraid to see the truth when it came to them. And therefore, they were saved by that truth. So can you and I. Thank you.